So tell me if this has ever happened to you. You're at home practicing and you're dialing in your tone on your amp modeler and you get everything set just perfect. Everything is reacting with the effects and the drives and everything the way that you want it to. And then you go head out to your gig or you head out to church to rehearsal or to play on Sunday morning and you plug in and it just doesn't sound the way that it had at home or it doesn't sound the way that you had expected it to. And this can be really frustrating, especially with a device like an amp modeler that's made for convenience. It's made to be easy to set up and play instead of lugging along a tube amp or a more elaborate setup with you. So today I want to kind of talk about some tips for getting the best sound out of your amp modeler, some things to think about, and some of the experiences that I have had just using amp modelers over the last few years, and hopefully I can share some of the things I've learned with you. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Sunday Tone. I'm Brendan, and if you are new around here, please consider subscribing to the channel to see more videos just like this one, but let's get into it. So ultimately, these units, no matter which one you're using, is meant to be convenient, easy to set up, and easy to bring with you, but sometimes they just end up being a headache. So today I want to share some tips with you, some things you might want to try and think about when you're using an amp modeler. So I think one of the first things to consider when talking about getting a good consistent sound out of an amp modeler is monitoring. So whether you're monitoring using in-ear monitors, you're using something like studio monitors or headphones, or even a powered cab that you plug your modeler into, I think it's a good idea to try out your modeler through different speakers, different headphones, and use a variety of things like that to check the sound and make sure it's not way too bright or way too dark. Because a lot of headphones, a lot of speakers, a lot of these things color your sound. And what can end up happening is, and I know I've had this happen to me in the past, is I listen only on one set of speakers or headphones at home. I dial in my sound and I might be dialing it brighter because I have darker headphones, darker speakers, and then I get to church, I get to the venue, whatever, and I plug in and everything is super bright and everything, my drives are all dialed in to be brighter, and lo and behold, everything sounds super shrill and too much high end and everything. So I think it's a good idea to consider what are you monitoring on and try it through a few different things to check and make sure that what you're monitoring through isn't coloring it too much, and you have a few different references to make sure that you are somewhere, in between in a good happy medium with your sound. So another thing to think about when you are monitoring your guitar tone is the volume that you're listening to it back at. So if you're listening on headphones or studio monitors and you have the volume pretty low, it might sound darker to you, which might cause you to naturally turn up the treble, turn up the mids and the presence, and make it a little brighter. And then later on, you find out when you have it at actual volume running through front of house, that it sounds too shrill or too bright. And so making sure when you monitor back that you have it at a decent volume. And if you think about playing through an amp, most amps, when they're at a normal volume, they're pretty loud, and naturally we perceive, louder, I think, sounds. I don't know this scientifically, but I think naturally a louder sound might sound brighter. And so if you're not monitoring at a decent level and you set up all of your effects and your overdrives and everything at that low level, and then you show up on Sunday morning and you're monitoring everything at a louder level, it might perceivably sound different, sound brighter, sound darker. The EQ will just feel different because you set everything up at such a low level, and then it'll be a pain to kind of tweak everything and fix everything. So another tip or thing to avoid that I have for in-ear monitors, especially if you are using a personal mixer at your church where each team member has their own little mixer where they can control the volume of all of the channels and kind of mix their own in-ears. So I'm talking about something like an Aviom mixer or a Allen & Heath, one of those ME units. A lot of these units have a built-in EQ that is on each unit, and what can happen is people can go in and boost the low end or boost the high end or tweak the mids. You come in and those settings are way up high or way down low, and you start playing and things are sounding weird, and you start tweaking your amp modeler to try and compensate for that without realizing that there's some extreme EQ set on your personal mixer. I know that's happened to me before, and I didn't realize it until later, and I'm like, oh, the bass is completely jacked all the way up on my mixer. And so when you come in to rehearsal or onto a Sunday morning, that's one thing to check and make sure that the EQ is set flat and you got the sound that you want. And then from there, if you want to make adjustments to the EQ, you can without being at some drastic setting before you start, changing your drives or changing your amp modeler. So the next thing I think is really important to getting a good sound is knowing your unit. And what I mean by that is know all the ins and outs of the particular unit that you're using. And I feel like pick one and kind of stick with it for a while and really learn how to make it sound good, what other people are doing to make it sound good. And what I mean by that is there's a ton of different units out there. It feels like every week there is a new modeler, a new capture device that comes out. And it always feels like there's this big rush to go, everybody grab that one sounds the best. And the reality is they all sound very similar. They all get a great tone. And it comes down to the features, like what features do you want with your unit and how do they react to pedals or how do they react to the effects that are within the unit. So knowing your unit means learn about how does it take gain, how does it take wet effects. Do you want to put the wet effects for the best results before or after? How do you adjust your drives? Some units have a lot of input compression, whereas some other units are more open, and depending on how the input compresses on the amp, you might want to set your drives differently depending on the drives you have and the unit that you're using. And I think about the unit in particular that I've been using most recently is Tonex. And with Tonex, an important thing is learning about the input gain, setting the input gain correct for the captures you're using and for the guitars you're using so you can get the desired sound. So if I plug in my guitar with a capture that I know other people have gotten great sounds with, and it sounds overly distorted, overly dark, it might be because my input gain isn't set right on the unit. And learning how other people set up their units, learning how the unit works will help you get the best sound out of it. And I think another important thing with learning your unit and really knowing everything about it is trying out different captures or different models within the unit, not just using the default or what it came with. Really exploring the different captures, the different models, and find out what you like, what matches the sound in your head or the sound that you're looking for. I think a lot of people will quickly throw in an AC30 and be done with it, and they're like, this just doesn't sound good, but maybe there's a different capture, a different model that would get closer to that sound that you're looking for. And I think with a lot of these things, people just want like an easy way to great tone, and it's like to really get all the flavors and really learn what you like, I think you have to dive deep into these units and learn the ins and outs of them. And the last thing with this is to make sure your unit is updated, you're running the newest firmware, which might seem like that's an obvious thing, but sometimes people don't think about that and the manufacturer might have put out an update that fixes some kind of glitch or some kind of weird sound that you're running into that would otherwise make you want to throw the unit out and move on to something else. So make sure you're updated and you're running the newest firmware. Another tip that I have for you is to think about how is your signal getting out? How are you getting your guitar signal from your unit out to front of house? And that's kind of like the inputs and outputs of your unit and what works best for your unit. So you might want to do some research on what other people use with your unit, what makes most sense, because depending on how you set it up, that might affect your sound and the sound that you're hearing back in your in-ears or at front of house. And so what that means is making sure you're using a high quality DI that isn't sucking the tone out of your signal, or for some particular units, it makes more sense to use a line isolator like what Pinstrip Pedals offers or what Walrus Audio offers. There's a bunch of them on the market, and I will link some of those below. So one final tip that I have for you is to know your sound team and build a relationship with the sound person on the other end of your signal. And this can't just be done in one night, but I think over time, building a really great relationship with your sound team is super helpful. And the reason why is you can ask for feedback. You can ask, how does this amp model sound compared to the one I was using earlier or the one I was using last week? And you can ask them how it sounds in the system. You can have them record it and play it back, or you can loop your sound, go out and listen with them, see how it sounds. Is there too much noise in my signal? Is my signal cutting through in the mix? Is my signal too dark or is it too bright? These are things that you should be talking with them about and getting a feel for. And they can also give you feedback on if your signal sounds too dry in the mix or too wet in the mix, because we have a tendency as guitar players to add too much delay and reverb, and sometimes that can muddy up everything and your signal isn't coming through clearly in the mix, but you don't know that until later when you listen back to the mix. So these are all good things to talk about with your sound person, and making sure they have a good sound, a good level at the source coming to them. So it's important to create that relationship and be able to talk about those things with them. So no matter what unit you're using, don't be afraid to tweak things and make adjustments. You know, I think if you set up and get a good sound, doesn't mean that every week in every environment and every place that you play that it's going to sound perfect. You need to make adjustments and learn how to make them so that your tone matches what you're looking for and what you hear in your head. So I want to hear from you guys. So let me know in the comments maybe issues you've run into the past and how you fix them, or maybe issues that you're dealing with right now and you're looking for advice on how to fix or resolve those issues. Let me know in the comments, because maybe someone else will learn something from that, and hopefully we can start a conversation on how to improve your tone on Sunday mornings. But thanks for checking out this video. I will see you all in the next one.